Feng Shui can take you from poor to rich. Have you ever found yourself standing in the checkout line of a grocery store late at night staring at the magazine rack where the glossy covers display the lives of the ultra-wealthy and feeling a sudden sharp pang of existential confusion mixed with a deep sense of cosmic injustice? You look at the photos of a young heir to a European banking dynasty or the daughter of a tech mogul living a life of limitless possibility on a yacht in the Mediterranean, and you ask yourself the most dangerous question a human being can ever ask, which is simply, why not me? Why was I born into a simpler? We open Instagram or TikTok and we are bombarded with curated images of effortless perfection. We see people our own age or younger driving cars that cost more than our parents' houses, and we feel a visceral reaction in the gut, a mixture of envy and despair that the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer might have described as the pendulum of life swinging violently between pain and boredom. But for most of us, it is just pain. We look at this disparity and we call it luck. We call it the lottery of birth. We tell ourselves that the universe is chaotic and random and that there is no rhyme or reason to who gets the palace and who gets the pavement. We comfort ourselves with the idea that chaos is the only ruler because the alternative, that there is a reason for this inequality, is too terrifying to contemplate. But I am here to tell you today that this comfort is a lie. If we peel back the superficial layers of our reality and look at the mechanics of destiny through a deeper, more rigorous philosophical and metaphysical lens, we realize that luck is a myth. What we are witnessing when we see extreme wealth or extreme suffering is not randomness, but the result of a complex mathematical equation of energy that spans centuries and possibly millennia. This is the truth of what the ancients called fortune or karma. Tonight I want to reveal to you that this mysterious force actually flows from three distinct sources. I am not sure if the modern world is ready to hear this truth because it challenges the very idea of victimhood and forces us to take responsibility for things that happened before we were even born, but I am going to share it with you anyway because it is the only way to make sense of the chaos. The first source of your life's fortune does not begin with you. It does not begin with your education, your hard work, or your choices. It begins long before you took your first breath. It is the karmic inheritance of your bloodline. Let us look closely at one of the most famous families in American history, the Kennedy family, often referred to as America's royal family. On the surface, they represent the pinnacle of charm, power, and public service. But if we look deeper into the origins of their fortune, we find the patriarch Joseph P. Kennedy. During the Prohibition era of the 1920s, when alcohol was banned in the United States, Joseph Kennedy amassed a significant portion of his initial fortune through bootlegging, running illegal liquor, and making deals with organized crime figures in Chicago and New York. He was ruthless in his business dealings, crushing competitors and manipulating stock markets with insider trading practices that would be illegal today. He was driven by a hunger for power so consuming that he was willing to step over anyone to get it. But perhaps his greatest transgression was against his own flesh and blood. When his daughter Rosemary Kennedy displayed mild behavioral problems and learning disabilities which threatened the family's image of perfection, Joseph authorized a lobotomy. It was a brutal surgical procedure performed in 1941. The doctors inserted an instrument resembling an ice pick into her brain and severed the connections to the prefrontal cortex. Rosemary was awake during the procedure, asked to recite songs and tell stories until she suddenly went silent. She was left incapacitated, infantile, and hidden away in an institution for the rest of her life, erased from the family photos. This act of sacrificing a child for the sake of ambition created a massive energetic deficit. The energy of these actions, the money earned from vice, the ruthlessness, the betrayal of family trust did not vanish when Joseph died. Flowed down the river of blood. We see this manifest time and again in what the world calls the Kennedy curse. We look at the family and we see John F. Kennedy assassinated at the height of his power in Dallas. We see Robert Kennedy gunned down in a hotel kitchen in Los Angeles just as he was poised to lead the nation. We see David Kennedy dying of an overdose in a Florida hotel room. We see Michael Kennedy dying in a skiing accident in Aspen. We see John F. Kennedy Jr. plunging his plane into the Atlantic Ocean. Is this just bad luck? Is it a statistical anomaly? Or is it the manifestation of debt, a spiritual invoice that was accrued during the ruthless accumulation of power in the early days of the family's rise? The universe demands balance. If you take what is not yours, or if you harm others to build your castle, the foundation is laid on shifting sand. Conversely, let us look at a different kind of legacy. Consider the Rockefellers. The founder, John D. Rockefeller, was initially despised as a ruthless monopolist who crushed the competition in the oil industry through his Standard Oil Trust. He was known for his coldness and his belief that competition was a sin. The Ludlow Massacre in 1914, where striking miners and their families were killed by National Guard troops and camp guards associated with Rockefeller interests, left a stain of blood on the family name that horrified the nation. But his son John D. Rockefeller Jr. spent his entire life trying to wash that stain away. He was a deeply religious man who felt the weight of his father's sins. He dedicated the family fortune to philanthropy, building the Rockefeller Center during the Great Depression to provide jobs, funding medical research that eradicated hookworm in the South, and preserving vast tracts of land for national parks. This massive pivot towards stewardship created a buffer, a karmic shield that allowed the families to transition from robber barons to respected statesmen. So when you see someone born with a silver spoon, do not envy them. You are merely witnessing the payout of an investment made 100 years ago. But remember that spoon can be tarnished if the debt hasn't been fully paid. The second source is perhaps the most controversial and personal. It is the karma you bring with you from your own past. Now, I know the concept of reincarnation is often associated with Eastern mysticism, but let us not forget that the very foundations of Western philosophy were built upon this idea. Pythagoras, the father of mathematics, explicitly taught the transmigration of souls, but nowhere is this more vividly described than in the works of Plato. In the final book of his masterpiece, The Republic, Plato recounts the myth of her. He tells the story of a soldier named her who dies in battle but comes back to life on his funeral pyre 12 days later. Or describes what he saw in the afterlife. He saw souls gathering in a great meadow to choose their next lives. The Fates, the daughters of necessity, laid out patterns of life before them. Some were lives of kings, some of beggars, some of athletes, some of sick men. The souls had to choose. But here was the trick: the choice was determined by the wisdom they had gathered in their previous lives. A soul that had been a tyrant in a past life might foolishly choose the life of a powerful dictator, again not realizing it was destined to end in a horrible assassination and eternal misery. A wise soul, perhaps one who had lived a humble life of philosophy, might choose the life of an obscure, quiet man, knowing it would bring peace and the opportunity for contemplation. This myth tells us that our current station is not a punishment, but a choice we made based on our own spiritual intelligence. Think of the human experience as a grand university. Why do some people get admitted to the PhD program of being a Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart composing symphonies at age 5 or a Leonardo da Vinci visualizing helicopters in the 15th century? Why are some born with the genetics of an Olympian athlete with a perfect body capable of breaking world records, while others struggle in the remedial classes of physical limitation, chronic illness, or crushing poverty? It is not an accident. It is a reflection of your standing in the spiritual evolution. Consider the physical body itself. In our modern consumer culture, we spend billions of dollars every year on the cosmetic industry. We are obsessed with masking our natural state. We undergo painful plastic surgeries to alter our noses. We inject toxins like Botox to freeze our wrinkles, and we spray expensive chemicals like Chanel No. 5 or Sauvage to hide our biological scent. Why? Because for the vast majority of humanity, the natural state is one of imbalance and impurity. Our bodies decay, they smell, they age. But have you ever met someone, perhaps a dedicated monk, a saintly figure like Francis of Assisi, or simply a person of incredible moral purity who seems to radiate a natural pleasantness? In the Catholic tradition, this is known as the odor of sanctity, where the bodies of saints were sent to emit a sweet floral smell upon death, instead of the stench of decomposition. This suggests that the vessel you inhabit is a direct reflection of the purity of the soul within it. You are not a victim of your genetics, you are the architect of them. You chose this difficulty level because it was the only way to learn the specific lesson your soul needed to advance to the next grade. The third source is the one you have absolute power over right now. It is the actions you take in this lifetime from the moment you hear this message until your last breath. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the universe's change in life is opinion, but he also understood that the universe is governed by logos, a rational force that rewards virtue. There is a universal law often summarized in the Bible as reaping what you sow. Every act of kindness, every dollar given in charity, every moment of restraint adds to your current account. But here is where most people get confused and frustrated. They say, I have been a good person for 20 years, I pay my taxes, I help my neighbors, why am I still suffering while the corrupt banker buys a third yacht? To answer this, look at the history of the Medici family in Renaissance Florence. The Medici were anchors, and in the eyes of the medieval church, banking and charging interest was a sin of usury punishable by eternal damnation. Cosimo de' Medici knew he was accumulating a massive spiritual debt with every floor in of interest he collected. To offset this, he began a program of massive cultural patronage. He funded the completion of the Duomo, he supported philosophical academies, and he poured money into the arts. His grandson Lorenzo the Magnificent continued this, supporting artists like Michelangelo and Botticelli. They were literally trying to buy their way out of hell by beautifying the world. They understood that wealth without stewardship is a curse. They practiced a version of noblesse oblige, the idea that nobility obligates. Let us analyze this secret of sustained wealth further by looking at the American industrialist Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie was a man of contradictions. In 1892, his steel company was involved in the Homestead strike, one of the most violent labor disputes in U.S. history, where private security guards known as Pinkertonests fought a gun battle with striking workers, leaving many dead and wounding dozens more. The river ran red with blood. Carnegie was devastated by the damage to his reputation and his soul. He realized that he had become the villain of the American story. In the second half of his life, he underwent a radical transformation. He wrote the Gospel of Wealth, arguing that the man who dies thus rich dies disgraced. He didn't just give money away randomly, he built over 2,500 public libraries across the world. He believed in giving people the tools to lift themselves up. He followed the unwritten rules of leaving a surplus. First, leaving a surplus for nature. Wealthy families like the Rockefellers understood that if you destroyed the land, you destroyed the source of wealth, which is why they donated the land for Grand Teton National Park and Acadia National Park. Second, leaving a surplus for society. Carnegie's libraries were his way of paying back the community that allowed him to succeed. Third, leaving a surplus for the common man. Henry Ford's decision to pay his workers $5 a day wasn't just charity, it was a brilliant understanding that a well-paid worker is a stable citizen and a loyal customer. He realized that you cannot win if everyone around you is starving. Fourth, and most importantly, leaving a surplus for descendants by not giving them everything. Look at the modern billionaires like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. They are pledging to give away the vast majority of their fortunes rather than dumping billions on their children. Why would they do this? Do they not love their kids? On the contrary, they do it because they love them deeply. They know that unearned wealth is toxic. Acts like a narcotic, destroying the drive, the character, and the soul of the child. By limiting the inheritance, they are actually preserving their children's own spiritual journey, forcing them to find their own purpose rather than drowning in the shadow of their ancestors. This brings us to the final answer to your burning question. Why do good people suffer? Why does the hard-working nurse struggle to pay bills while the corrupt politician lives in luxury? The answer lies in the cold, hard math of the universe and the physics of time delay. Think of karma like the light from a distant star. The light we see today left that star millions of years ago. The reality of the star right now might be completely different, but we won't see it for another million years. Your current reality is the sum of three numbers: your ancestral debt, your past life karma, and your present actions. Let us imagine this as a bank account. If your ancestral account is overdrawn because your great-grandfather was a tyrant, that is minus $500,000. If your past life account is in debt because you lived a life of selfishness previously, that is another minus $500,000. So you start this life $1 million in the hole. Now in this life, you are a saint. You work hard, you are kind, you give to charity. You generate $10,000 of good karma. But when you look at your balance, it still says minus $990,000. You feel like you are suffering. You feel like the universe is ignoring you. But and this is the critical part: if you had not generated that $10,000, you would be in even deeper misery. You are digging yourself out of a hole you didn't dig in this lifetime, but a hole that belongs to your soul's history nonetheless. This is the hard truth of the universe. It is not immediate gratification. It is a long game. It is a multi-generational marathon. Consider the chaos theory or the butterfly effect, where a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in a later state. Your small act of kindness today might be the butterfly flapping its wings that prevents a hurricane in your next life. So when you see the wicked prosper, realize they are simply burning through a savings account established long ago by someone else. They are spending down their spiritual capital, and eventually the check will bounce. When you see the virtuous suffer, realize they are paying off a mortgage on their soul so that their next chapter or their children's chapter can be free. The universe is never wrong. The accounting is always perfect. Keep building, keep giving, keep leaving a surplus, because eventually the balance will tip and the fortune you seek will not just be in your bank account, but in the very fiber of your being.